In the summer of 2006, England lost yet another penalty shootout. But deteriorating at the decisive moment is nothing new. This edition of Sport Uncovered looks at how the pressure of fulfilling a lifelong dream accounts for those sportsmen who turn triumph into tragedy. A dread of penalty kicks has become a recurring problem for the English.
It's a penalty shootout. Straight away, you think, you look at the opposition and you look at us, and to us, there's too much pressure.
I haven't won many penalty shootouts. It's something that everyone wants to get to the bottom of. Why do we keep losing on penalties?
This programme explains why sportsmen and women at the top of their game can suddenly play like amateurs.
He failed in the most visible way in front of millions of people.
And we get inside the minds of some of the sportsmen who've suffered meltdown at the crucial moment.
In the 6 finals that I lost, I was beaten fair and square by 4 of them, and 2 of them I threw away.
We explore how modern athletes try to overcome the effects of too much pressure and explain why we shouldn't feel pity for the runners-up. Choke, the taboo word of sport.
Well, it's a relatively new term, choking, and I don't know where it came from. I suspect it came from the United States. Sometimes I think it's a bit cruel.
Choking is essentially a perception of pressure and how someone reacts to it.
It's when an athlete who is at a pivotal moment in a contest is aware suddenly of the enormity of what is happening, and instead of playing instinctively, instead of playing in a way which is based on instinct, they begin to think about what they're doing, and the whole body begins to slow down.
Matthew Syed should know. Formerly England's #1 table tennis player, he's known the nightmare of breakdown due to anxiety.
I was suddenly useless. You know, my form, my ability to play table tennis plummeted. And from that moment until the end of my career, it became a habit. Whenever I got to a crucial moment, a decisive moment in a match, I was unable to play in the way that I was able to do in practice. And that was just a horrible scenario.
England's first horrible scenario involving penalty shootouts was in 1990 after a World Cup semi-final against West Germany. Stuart Pearce was the first to crumble under the strain. Chris Waddle would be the next.
I really ran up and thought, if I hit this as hard as I can, if he saves it, it's going to be a great save, or it's going to hit him rather than him make a save. And unfortunately, I caught it so well. I mean, I couldn't hit it any harder or any better. And then when you just saw it rising, you just thought, uh-oh. Once it misses, it first takes a little bit to sink in, and then you just basically catch your breath and you think, and you see all the Germans celebrating because they ran on the goalkeeper, and they were like 10 yards away from us, and you just think, and then as you just think, try and keep yourself together a bit, get the change room, and that change room basically nearly, I would say, 80% of the squad cried. The lads were brilliant, but in the back of your mind, just think, you missed, you let them down.
England were eliminated from the World Cup in similar fashion 8 years later. By 2006, they had gone out of 4 major tournaments on penalties.
So as soon as the final whistle goes, extra time goes, finish. You know then it's a penalty shootout. Straight away, you think, you look at the opposition and you look at us, and to us, there's too much pressure. There's been so much built into it now since 1990 when I took one. Every tournament now, when it goes to penalties, it's like, oh no, it's penalties, we're out.
It's become a kind of joke in a sense, but actually on a certain level, the belief actually does grow, and it also grows for the opponents, and the opponents can actually start creating a belief that England don't take them well, and we can take them, so we can beat England.
A much-hyped England squad travelled to the World Cup in Germany with high expectations, despite indifferent form.
I could be the driver in articulated lorry.
I don't think anyone watching us ever believed that we were going to win the World Cup. I mean, the players were still talking that we were going to, win the World Cup. We were getting the results, but we weren't playing well. But I think deep down, even the players realised that if we come up against good opposition and we weren't, we're playing, or we carried on playing as we did, we were going to go out, and that's how it proved.
In the quarter-final, they faced Portugal. After 2 hours of stalemate, during which Wayne Rooney was sent off, England prepared for yet another penalty shootout.
As, extra time and penalties loomed, I think it's fair to say that in the press box there was a sense of, oh no.
Despite regularly scoring penalties for his club, Frank Lampard got stage fright.
The penalty taking in a major championship like the World Cup or European Championships, I think probably distills pressure in a more fearful way than almost anything else. You can often see on the facial expressions of the footballers whether they're likely to succeed or fail. Some of them, their expression is frozen on their face. They're, as it were, almost paralysed by fear.
Although Owen Hargreaves scored, another accomplished penalty taker, Steven Gerrard, was unsuccessful.
So until you've been under that pressure, no one can tell what they're going through. When Lampard walked up and Gerrard walked, you thought, well, there's two bankers. Them two will definitely score.
There was something about Lampard and Gerrard that just, I suppose, had that clunking inevitability that made it particularly depressing.
And the enormity of the situation clearly affected Liverpool's Jamie Carragher, who struck his penalty prematurely.
I didn't feel that much pressure really, or I was just concentrating on trying to score, but maybe I took the first one and the referee hadn't blew his whistle, so maybe little slight things like that maybe do get to you, and you forget to wave the referee's whistle.
Carragher's second attempt was saved, and for the 5th time in 8 major tournaments, England's footballers had failed under the ultimate pressure.
At the time you realise the whole world's watching, but you don't actually think about that as you're walking up. I mean, it's only after you realise you've missed, you've got home, that you've been knocked out and everyone's talking about it, in the press and people ringing you up, that you realise how big a situation it is. I mean, it's similar to losing a cup final, really. I mean, it's just total silence. There's nothing anyone can say, not the manager, coaching staff. It's just, there's not a lot you can do. You just got to get on with it, get back to the hotel, pack your bags, because you're off the next day.
Like the players who've missed before them, Lampard, Gerrard and Carragher will not be allowed to forget their errors, adding to the burden of the next England team involved in a penalty shootout.
We sometimes have a tendency to scapegoat, and somebody who misses a penalty is a very easy target for the media and for the press. And I think that added expectation, that added burden of potential negativity might add to the phenomenon.
Wherever you go, it could be anywhere in the world, you'll bump into a Brit, an English person. And after 4 or 5 questions, you know what question's coming. But you can't get away from it.
The team returned home to less than a hero's welcome. Some experts have used the term institutionalised choking to explain England's repeated disappointment, the expectation of failure being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever the problem, English football fans demand a solution.
Now, English players, this is what you must listen to and you must learn. It's very important if you're going to be successful at taking penalty kicks in the next World Cup. Here are the variables: the velocity, the speed of the ball.
In a bid to resolve the problem, Dr. David Lewis was challenged to use mathematics to help remedy the English team's predicament.
The time between the player placing the ball to kick it and actually kicking it. Again, the optimum time is either 13 plus seconds or less than 3 seconds. Between these two, between 4 and 12, we have what they call the Southgate window. Then we need to look at the number of steps which the football. Well, the formula was commissioned by Ladbrokes, and I understand from them that they did in fact send it off to Sven. I'm not sure what he would have said to that. My suspicion is, and I may be doing him a grave injustice here, his response would not perhaps have been terribly courteous. Look at Hargreaves, absolutely perfect penalty, inside the foot, scored 22.
Ericsson was possibly disappointed to hear that Alan Shearer is apparently the perfect penalty taker.
And that tells him
he retired just before the 2006 World Cup.
Get that perfect penalty. We're simply scientists who are saying, as far as our research is concerned, these are the kind of things you need to take into account, and if you take them all into account, then the chances are, the probability is, you will make the perfect penalty.
People say to me, what's a perfect penalty then? Perfect penalty is put it in the back of the net. Doesn't matter how it gets there. That is a perfect penalty.
In part 2, we look at how individual sports create even greater opportunity for heartache.
Some of the times I ended up doing DIY in the summer just to keep away from people.
If I'd have made that putt at the British Open, Mrs. Dove, you'll always be remembered for missing that putt.
I was almost like labeled, you know. She's a great player, but she doesn't have the nerves to win.
Well, I think sport, the interest of it isn't just aesthetics. It's about the psychological dynamic. Two people or two teams competing for just one prize. And it is fascinating to see how that dynamic is skewed, is changed, is transformed by what is called mental strength.
No, I'd done the wrong thing, and I admit that. You know, that's cost me a lot of tournaments. It's probably cost me, I don't know, 2 or 3 world championships.
Jimmy White was born in 1962 in South London. In 1980, he joined the professional snooker ranks. His natural flair, street credibility and artful dodger persona led to him replacing Alex Higgins as the sport's most popular player.
From the minute I opened my eyes to the minute my mum or dad dragged me out to the snooker club, I was just wanted to play all the time.
Jimmy was always destined to be a snooker player, just so much talent. The first time I saw Jimmy, he'd just broken his leg and was hitting balls around with a walking stick, and you could see he was very liked, and he was obviously the whirlwind then.
White liked fast cars and was fast around the table. When he scored a maximum break at the 1992 World Championship, he cemented his place in the public's affections.
The
appeals to the common man. He likes a drink, a bet, a smoke. He likes to sample all life's pleasures. He's modest when he wins. He doesn't whinge when he loses. Everybody likes him.
I'm just a kid from the street. I'm reasonably friendly with people, you know, and I think they like the way I attack the game.
White's aggressive approach helped him to win 10 ranking titles, including the 1992 UK Championship.
He was right up there with the best players, and of course it's his own personal tragedy that he never won the supreme title, the one that he really wanted.
In the 6 finals that I lost, I was beaten fair and square by 4 of them, and 2 of them I threw away.
It has been the World Championship which has eluded White. In the 1992 final, he sashayed into a huge lead against Stephen Hendry. Victory seemed a formality.
I thought I was going up the M1 with the trophy, for sure.
You're a long way in front. You can almost feel it, almost touch it. And then something happens and suddenly it's not certain that you're going to win. And that awful thought enters a player's mind, wouldn't it be terrible if I lost now?
Jimmy's mindset would have been about not losing from here. I'm so far ahead, I don't want to lose. And then that kind of allows in the element of the possibility of losing.
White led 14-8, but watched in horror as his lead was gradually overhauled.
58.
As Hendry got better, White disintegrated.
Stephen's now making centuries and 80s like back-to-back all the time. He's playing his top-class game. And now I'm struggling and my focus was completely gone. And I was gone.
106.
Hendry won 10 straight frames, and White had squandered an apparently unassailable lead. Although Hendry was undeniably brilliant, it was a stunning surrender by Jimmy White.
White is just an extraordinary example of how somebody breaks down psychologically under pressure. And he's somebody who is always mentioned when people think about those who are unable to convert talent into achievement.
2 years later, White met Hendry once again in the final. This time it would be decided by the last frame, and once more White's nerve would be put to the ultimate test.
You don't get all the way to the final without being able to hold your nerve. You don't get to the final of anything without being a great pressure player. You can't turn professional without being a great pressure player. So it's just that last hurdle that people pick up on.
After a mistake by Hendry, White began to compile what looked like a championship-winning break. In perfect position, he approached the final fence.
Unfortunate for me, instead of realising I still had 1 hurdle to go, I start thinking about who the people I'm going to thank in the game, who the people who's had me over the years.
White had made the error of not staying in the moment.
29.
He has a straightforward black-offed spot, a shot that he would pot, well, I was going to say 100 times out of 100 for a player of his ability.
I just got down, hit it under pressure because my thought pattern had gone, I'm going to win the World Championship. All I've got to do is pop 5 or 6 more balls.
But in some unaccountable way, and this can only be explained by the pressure, he freezes on it.
I just threw my cue at it and, you know, it's called a twitch.
No matter how strong and tough and macho you are, if your mind is unable to stay in the moment and just do it, there's very little you can do about it, and it's a really horrific experience. It's not nice at all.
The bulletproof Hendry seized his moment and cleared the table to overcome White for the 4th time in the world final.
I think it must have been terrible for Jimmy watching Hendry make that clinching break in the deciding frame. it's bad enough to lose, but to lose something as big as that, your heart's desire, when you know you should have won, very, very difficult to take.
White had blown an ideal opportunity to become world champion. 6 times he has been in the final, 6 times Jimmy White has come up short.
Devastation. Some of the times I ended up doing DIY in the summer just to keep away from people.
Whether Jimmy gets remembered as being the best player in the world that's never won the World Championship, I don't know. In my eyes, it doesn't really matter. And also, the most important thing is whether it matters to him. Because as long as he can deal with it, it doesn't really matter.
If I don't win the World Championships, I will be known as the best player in the world never to have won it. I know I'm going to have that, but I'm not finished yet.
You're not a winner till you win, till you sign your scorecard. And I did not do it in the proper fashion. I hesitated. I got sidetracked off from something else.
Doug Sanders was born in 1933 in Georgia, USA.
Take one fresh and tender kiss.
For golf fans, Sanders has become synonymous with the horror of missing a 3-foot putt. A poor boy made good from the deep south, he was a winner of 20 PGA tournaments. Not only was Sanders one of the best players of his era, he was one of the game's most vibrant characters.
I've always been a type person of wearing the different colored clothes, you know, and the shoes and all that things. So, you know, you're out there, and I wanted to be a little flamboyant. And over here is where that I keep a few of my slacks. This is just one of the closets. I try to keep them pretty much in the colors. And then, as you can see over here, this is where that I have some of my shoes. Coming a long ways from Cedartown, Georgia. And I didn't even have a pair of tennis shoes. Now look at all these things. One of the problems you have trying to be a good dresser is that you have to have the socks here in all the different colors. And then, of course, if you're anything like Doug Sanders, well, of course, yes, all the underwear, it all matches too. So maybe I shouldn't show those. But anyway, that's Doug.
Sanders swung off the course as well as on it. In the 1960s, he rubbed shoulders with presidents and ran with the Rat Pack. Sanders was christened the Peacock of the Fairways. Outrageous clothes, vintage champagne, and Frank Sinatra over for dinner were all part of his playboy lifestyle. Doug was a winner, but sadly that is not how history will judge him.
I've lived a great life. Sure, I wish, like the British Open, if I'd have made that putt at the British Open, this is Doug, you'll always be remembered for missing that putt.
At the 1970 Open Championship at St Andrews, Sanders had the opportunity to realise every golfer's fantasy, winning the greatest tournament at the home of golf. The Peacock strutted his way to the top of the leaderboard with only one hole to play.
Coming up the last hole, there was the championship in the palm of it, with his fingers closing. All he had to do was close his hand and make a speech. I won. And suddenly something happened.
I never thought about anything bad happening. I was thinking about just wave to them, you know, walk on up, knock it on the green, knock it on in there, you know, and then wave and jump up and down. But didn't quite turn out that way.
Sanders needed a routine 2 putts for the biggest prize of his life, but it was routine that would be his undoing.
When I hit the putt, I thought I made it. The first one.
3 feet from victory, he gave himself plenty of time to think about the situation and then stood frozen over his putt like a rabbit in the headlights.
Because he took so long over it, to actually allow the negative language to come in. So he may have been saying something to himself like, don't miss the putt, you know, don't lose this championship. And what he does, he mentally rehearses missing the shot.
And I looked down and I saw a little pebble there. And it looked like a little brown piece, well, this piece of the grass had been burned by the sun. And it looked like a little rock.
When he went down to pick up that piece of grass that was in the way, he went straight back into his stance. And most players at that stage would have backed off and gone through the motion again.
And of course, I didn't back away. And then I'm saying to myself, well, you're over it too long. Doug, what are you doing? Why don't you mark it? I wasn't choking. I wasn't not even thinking about that.
I can still see him going down. He's like this, he's like this, he's like this, and then all of a sudden he goes, and then he goes back, straight, and then he hits the putt. Oh, so.
You know, I go back and I look at this, and of course, sometimes they says, Doug, do you ever think about that putt? I said, oh, sometimes I go as high as 5 minutes without even thinking about it, you know.
That just shows you how clearly you have to think under that kind of pressure. You want to rush it, and you want to get it over with, and you want to make the putt. But I guarantee you, if Doug Saunders had stepped back off that putt, marked the ball, put it down, and taken his time, he probably would have made it.
I just don't know what to do with myself.
Saunders paced the green in circles, agonising over what he'd just done. He'd won tournaments all over the world, but had just let the big one get away.
I really sympathised with Doug Saunders. I mean, it was just, I never saw a man, he just gave it away. I mean, he was just short of the green. I mean, he just flat gave it away.
Jack Nicklaus ruthlessly showed Saunders how to do it the following day in the playoff. Doug finished in the top 5 of every major, but never came first.
We walk through those walks of life, and but that'll be the one that will always haunt me.
I was almost like labeled, you know. She's a great player, but she doesn't have the nerves to win. And it was very disturbing because every time I played well and I won tournaments and beat good players, it was like, okay, but that label was always there.
Jana Novotná was born in 1968 in the Czech Republic.
All through her career, she was a fantastic all-court player, and she was very, very exciting.
An outstanding doubles player, Novotná's game was perfectly suited to the grass courts of Wimbledon. In 1993, she overcame her compatriot Martina Navratilova to reach her first singles final.
But she had the unfortunate habit of growing up in an era when there were fantastic tennis players. There was Martina Navratilova around, there was Steffi Graf. That was her main bugbear, Steffi Graf.
And it was Graf who stood between Novotná and her first Grand Slam title.
When I was playing against Steffi, I knew that I was playing an extremely difficult opponent. And playing Steffi many times before that finals, I knew that you really have to stay on top of her the whole time. So if you give her a little tiny opening, she will just take over and come back.
Graf won the first set, but Novotná rattled through the second 6-1. She then broke service twice in the final set.
Hey, Miss Novotná leads 4-1, final set.
And she gets to a stage then when she thinks, not only am I beating her, I am going to beat her, aren't I?
She was getting close to the winning line, realised what it would mean in terms of a life-changing experience, and it was just too much for her.
living at the moment is the most important thing. It's very easy to talk about it. You know before you go into the match, you know it after the match, but it sometimes was very difficult for me to control that when I was on the court.
Twice, Novotná was just 5 points from victory. Both times, her game imploded.
Advantage, Miss Graf.
No matter how many times I've seen the tape and no matter how much I think about it, I still know and believe that I really didn't get extremely nervous. I really wouldn't have a problem even now admitting that, that I choked or that I did something bad and that I didn't feel good.
Game is Graf.
And when it got, to the situation a couple of times that she was ready to, get through the match, she choked. I mean, it's part of us being an athlete is being able to get through that. Or we've all choked. Believe me, we've all choked. We've all lost matches we should have won. Unfortunately, when it's in the centre court at Wimbledon in the fight on the final day, that's when it really, really hurts.
Oh! Game is Graf. Love 15.
And everybody in centre court, everybody of the millions tuning in around the world were aware what was going on for Novotná. And Graf played it beautifully. She wasn't going to allow that title to slip from her grasp. It's merciless.
Novotná had looked the certain winner, but had deteriorated from champion to park player.
Game, set, match, Miss Graf. 2 sets to 1, 7-6, 1-6, 6-4.
I think the whole country just fell for me, and because I was not afraid to show my emotions. And I think people like that.
As she received the consolation prize, Jana broke down.
Jana became much more known throughout the world, and in a very sympathetic way. Each person watching that match could identify with something in their lives where they were expected to come through, and maybe circumstances just weren't quite right that day and they didn't.
The Duchess of Kent assured her there would be other opportunities, but Novotná was inconsolable. In part 3, we look at possibly the most extraordinary mistake of them all.
J'ai fait ce que je pouvais au moment qui était donné, et puis bon, il y a certaines personnes qui peuvent penser que j'aurais dû faire autre chose, et là, libre à chacun de penser ce qu'il veut.
My wife cried for him. My wife, who understands golf, was in tears.
We examine how disappointment has affected the victims of the jitters.
Oh, my life would have changed in so many ways.
And we discover how today's young sportsmen try to make themselves choke-proof.
Tranquil.
It's difficult to go out and get a cup of tea when you're seeing somebody fall apart. And it's very difficult for the sportsman, but it is compelling if macabre of viewing.
Même si on donne 200% de ce qu'on peut donner, bon, ben à l'arrivée, il faut prendre ce qui vient. Et puis si on n'est pas prêt à perdre, ben, il faut faire autre chose que du sport. Je crois qu'il faut rester dans un coin.
Jean van der Velde was born in 1966 in Mont-de-Marsan, France. Until 1999, he'd been a journeyman professional on the European Golf Tour. A likeable and courteous man, he'd won just one title on the tour and had attracted little attention. But at the climax of the Open Championship at Carnoustie, all that changed. For 3 days, Van der Velde dominated the best players in the world on one of golf's toughest courses. He approached the final round 5 shots clear of the field.
I love the last day of the majors. They are fantastic to look at how psychological disintegration can take place. And we've seen it many, many times. Van der Velde was extraordinary.
He actually deserved to win the championship, and it wouldn't have been a bad thing for the game if he had.
Many expected Van der Velde to buckle on the final afternoon, but his challengers fell away, and by the time he reached the par 4 18th hole, 6 would have been good enough to win him the title.
Je crois que les gens surtout ont pensé que l'Open, entre guillemets, était peut-être pour moi ou m'était peut-être dû, bien qu'en sport il n'y ait rien de dû, parce que j'avais mené du 36e jusqu'au départ du 72e.
On the 18th tee, the circumstances clearly interfered with Van der Velde's thought process, and despite having shots in hand, he took an unnecessary risk.
We saw him take the head cover off the driver and with, oh my good God, what's he going to do now? Then we saw him swing and we saw the ball in the air. And it was coming down and it missed the water, missed the stream, and there on the, oh, we've done it now.
He had won that Open Championship, hands down. I mean, you put him in that same position today, if he'd hit driver on there, he should be stood up in front of a firing squad.
Ah, c'est sûr que je ne changerai rien à mes 2 premiers coups. Je pense que bon, le premier coup, comme je l'ai dit, je ne pourrais pas vivre en essayant de taper un fer au départ et puis en ratant le fairway, en me mettant dans 1001 problèmes. Et en fait, en essayant d'assurer, perdre en assurant, je trouve qu'il n'y a pas pire.
Van der Velde's lucky tee shot had not avoided disaster, merely delayed it. He had one more key decision to make, but there was no logic to the conclusion he came to.
He did get into a state of confusion. He stopped doing the things that he was doing up to the point of the 18th hole, and he changed.
Again, Van der Velde ignored the safe option. He hit his ball into a grandstand, and it rebounded back over the Barry Burn, the stream that guards Carnoustie's 18th green.
But it wasn't a clever shot. It really wasn't a clever shot. You can analyse it whichever way you like. Then it was a series of events that you couldn't, you wouldn't have wanted to have written about.
If there was one specific moment that Van der Velde's mind let his body down, then it was when he played his 3rd stroke. He decelerated on the shot, and it leisurely looped into the water.
His brain has now switched off. God knows what's going on in here now, because I'm in the midst of throwing away the championship.
Giving it all away, sail away, sail away.
His ball is in 3 or 4 inches of water at that time, up against a wall which is 5-6 foot high, with no way of advancing the ball anywhere.
To be honest, I was looking at my watch. 8:45, deadline almost come and gone. They're waiting for the stuff, and there he is standing, looking completely spaced out in the Barry Burn. I mean, was the tide going to come in and out? You know, how much longer was it going to take? It was horrific.
Well, only myself to blame. See, I was just a boy. There was nobody else to blame.
It was a comedy of errors, and I couldn't watch. I mean, I couldn't watch. My wife and I were back at the house. I kept walking outside. I said, he can't do that.
Oh, I was just a boy, giving it all away.
He failed in the most visible way in front of millions of people.
My wife cried for him. My wife, who understands golf, was in tears.
Having finally decided against playing from the water, Jean put his 5th shot into a bunker and his opportunity was gone.
Van der Velde was a really vivid demonstration of how an elite sportsman can become a hobby player because of pressure and because of choking. Not only was he selecting the wrong strokes, but he couldn't execute them either.
He was beaten in a playoff by another journeyman golfer, Paul Lawrie, but the 1999 Open will be remembered for the man who gave it away.
J'ai fait ce que je pouvais au moment qui était donné, et puis bon, il y a certaines personnes qui peuvent penser que j'aurais dû faire autre chose. Et là, libre à chacun de penser ce qu'il veut.
Jean van der Velde has put a brave face on his disaster, but the disappointment of losing out was profound.
I think it affected him, and it still affects him now. I mean, I'm sure, you know, his marriage broke up afterwards, and a lot of his golf went completely off. So it went deep, but he was too much of a gentleman to make a big fuss over it.
However, having recovered from a knee injury in 2006, Jean won his 2nd European Tour title in Madeira. He now lives in Dubai. In order to avoid emulating Van der Velde, many modern sportsmen have turned to mind coaches for help.
Moscow.
There are now over 250 accredited sports psychologists in the UK alone.
The putt-in is just letting me down.
Lee Slattery is a young player on the European Tour who has regular sessions with hypnotherapist Don McPherson.
I'll be there now. Right there now. Nice, slow, deep breaths. And just relax. Go a little deeper into that relaxation. And choose the first tee or the 10th tee. Choose it now. Because
I started working with Don at the beginning of this year, because coming down the stretch of a tournament, there can be a lot of things running through your mind at that time, and it's trying to just completely delete these from your mind and stay relaxed. You know, almost as if you're playing with your friends back home, and that's the kind of state of mind you've got to get into to play your best golf, especially under pressure.
Psychologists use a number of methods to help players cope with the anxiety of a big tournament. Many sportsmen use hypnosis to instill the skills which help calm them down. These include correct body language and breathing routines.
Now just take a few moments. And there are techniques you can learn to clear the mind so you have clarity of mind. So breathing has several benefits. First of all, it brings you into the present moment. People think, well, it's all right saying be in the here and now. How do you bring yourself in the here and now when there's pressure? Well, the easiest and fastest way is to breathe, but not just breathe like this, but breathe from your tummy. Zen warrior breathing to really fast track the relaxation. Your body responds immediately to slow, deep breaths. 1, 2, and 3. Open your eyes. There you are. Just reacclimatise to the room. Bit of mental rehearsal to connect you to the tournament.
The era that I started in, it would have been laughed at. It would have been a sign of weakness that you admitted that you needed help. And I'm sure that's how it was perceived. Now it's different. Now we're in this modern age of it's okay to say you need help, or that the mind coaches have done a good job in saying that they need to be part of the equation.
If you feel better after speaking to some guy or getting hypnotised or whatever, if you think that makes you feel better before you kick that ball, do it. I think I'm open-minded about anything, and but I suppose the easiest thing for us is to tell the Germans to put an England kit on.
Today, Doug Sanders lives in Texas. While he's hardly impoverished, he generates his income by hosting golf days. If he'd holed that putt in 1970, he could have continued his playboy lifestyle into his old age.
Oh, my life would have changed in so many ways. I could have signed contracts that day for millions of dollars. And I was ready to make that leap to bring Doug Sanders up there in the true sport life style where he's supposed to be. But I didn't get there because I didn't win the major.
Jimmy White believes he can still win the World Championship, but at the age of 45, the odds are against it.
I'm a happy soul. I play in a lot of poker, but I'm really enjoying my snooker, and I'm really looking forward to the tournaments. And, you know, I've said this many times before, you know, I do believe I can win, but I have to put the work in, which you're interfering with now.
So hurry up and win. What's worth waiting for?
Jana Novotná was able to redeem herself. In 1998, she faced Natalie Tauzier in her third Wimbledon final.
I could almost feel it, that people are just like, come on, Jana, you have to do it because we really want you to do it. It was amazing support and a great feeling that I have until this day.
On this occasion, she held her nerve and won with little fuss in straight sets.
I was extremely happy when she finally broke through and won the final. In actual fact, my family members were shocked to see me crying. I was actually so happy for her. It was really absolutely fantastic moment.
You know, it's funny how one match can change everything. Since 1998, after the Wimbledon final, I've never heard anyone question my nerves ever again. So that's what happens.
As long as sport is played, there will be those who become renowned for finishing second rather than winning.
And those people are perceived to be very weak in the world of sport these days. That's a weak-minded thing to have, but it's natural.
Everybody chokes, just some choke more than others.
Perhaps it's not the runners-up, but the apparently armour-plated champions who deserve our sympathy. To be nerveless is to be lacking a human quality. Sportsmen and women who finish second should not be confused with losers. They're world-class athletes who are no less people for not clearing the final hurdle. However, their disappointment will always be gripping for sports fans.